Mhm. Hare Krishna. So we are continuing. Okay. So here, Prabhupada in the introduction is giving a brief description of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu from the teachings of Lord Chaitanya, the book he had composed. Okay. So now, because without the mercy of Lord Chaitanya and the Panchatattva, it's not very easy to attain Krishna. So we need their mercy. Okay, that's why Prabhupada has given introduction of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Sri Vyasadeva very kindly compiled the Vedic knowledge in his Vedanta Sutra. But if one hears the commentation of the Mayavada school as represented by the Shankara Sampradaya, certainly he will be misled on the path of spiritual realization. So one should not hear the commentaries of the Shankara Sampradaya, okay? Because this is the Mayavada philosophy, and we will be affected. Like so, we are warned to not to listen to those commentaries. The theory of emanations is the beginning subject of the Vedanta Sutra. All the cosmic manifestations are emanations from the absolute personality of Godhead by its inconceivable different energies. The example of the touchstone is applicable to the theory of emanation. The touchstone can convert an unlimited quantity of iron into gold, and still the touchstone remains as it is. Similarly, the Supreme Lord can produce all manifested worlds by his inconceivable energies, and yet is full and unchanged, is Purna, complete, and all the unlimited number of Purnas emanate from him is still Purna. The theory of illusion of the Mayavada school is advocated on the ground that the theory of emanation will cause a transformation of the absolute truth. If that is the case, Vyasadeva is wrong. To avoid this, they have skillfully brought in the theory of illusion. But the world of, or the cosmic creation is not false, as maintained by the Mayavada school. It simply has no permanent existence. A non permanent thing cannot be called false altogether. But the conception that the material body is the self is certainly wrong. So, this Mayavadis, like, they usually the supreme lord though is actually is the source of everything that emanates in the material world or even in the spiritual world. So they usually in the material world we have this conception, if we take something from a certain thing, slowly the value of the original thing diminishes. Okay, but that is not the case with the supreme lord. He is spiritual, and this material aspect does not apply to the spiritual aspect. Okay, so they feel like, to avoid this, um, so so they feel like, on the ground that the theory of emanation will cause a transformation of the absolute truth. So in that case Vyasadeva is wrong, because to avoid this they have skillfully brought in the theory of illusion. So they say this world is not but the world is the cosmic creation is not false, but they say the world is false, it's illusion. Okay, it's simply as but actually in reality the world is material world is there, but it is temporary, it's not altogether false. Okay, so a non-permanent thing cannot be called all false altogether, but the conception that the material body is the self is certainly wrong. most of us we think that this material body, the gross material body and the subtle material body, we consider them our true identity. That is wrong. Okay. Pranava, Om, or the Omkara in the Vedas, is the primeval hymn. This transcendental sound is identical with the form of the Lord. All the Vedic hymns are based on this Pranava Omkara. Tattvam Asi is but a side word in the Vedic literatures, and therefore this word cannot be the primeval hymn of the Vedas. Sripad Shankaracharya has given more stress on the side word Tattvam Asi than on the primeval principle Omkara. So it's said that Om is the Pranava, okay, or it is the primeval hymn, and this transcendental sound is identical with the form of the Lord. And all the Vedic hymns are based on this Omkara. And this Tattvam Asi um, is a side word in the Vedic literatures, and these people, like in the in the Sripad Shankaracharya's sampradaya, they have given more stress on this side word Tattvam Asi than the principal Omkara. Okay, so the Lord thus spoke on the Vedanta Sutra and defied all the propaganda of the Mayavada school. So the Bhattacharya tried to defend himself and his Mayavada school by jugglery of logic and grammar, but the Lord defeated him by his forceful arguments. He confirmed that we are all related with the personality of God eternally, and that devotional service is our eternal function in exchanging the dealings of our relations. The result of such exchanges is to attain prema or love of Godhead. When love of Godhead is attained, love for all other beings automatically follows because the Lord is the sum total of all beings. So now, after Bhattacharya, for 1 week, he recited this Vedanta Sutras and all that too, and the commentary on that too. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu quietly listened to him without speaking at all. Silently, he was listening to him. And then finally, after completion, Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, he asked the Lord, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, why you have not spoken anything? Why you have not asked anything? So Lord says, actually, I've read this Vedanta Sutras and I understand the Vedanta Sutra as it is because the meanings are self-sufficient. But when you explain that, it is I feel it's misinterpreted and I cannot understand that. That is why I am keeping quiet. So this Bhattacharya, he tried to defend himself and his Mayavada school by jugglery of logic and grammar. Usually these people, they usually use Nyaya or logic to defend themselves, okay? Because they are mostly based their logic on Upanishads. Buddhists, they don't believe in the Vedas at all. These Mayavadis, they get their they say their proof is from the Upanishads. In the Upanishads, they say Brahman is there. So they have this partial truth they take from the Upanishad. They don't take the complete Upanishads or the Vedas into picture, and they come to this wrong conclusion by logic. And you use jugglery of logic and grammar to support their philosophy. So, but Chaitanya Mahaprabhu strongly argued with him forcefully and made him convince him, and he convinced him that devotional service is superior and it is the eternal function of the jiva, and it's in exchanging the dealings of our relations, with the Lord. So result of such exchanges between the Lord and the jiva is to attain prema, he says, or love of God. When love of God is attained, that is when prema is attained, love for all beings automatically follows because the Lord is the sum total of all living beings. So when we develop prema for the Lord, we automatically develop love for all the jivas. Okay? Because Lord is the sum total of all living beings. That's why when they say when you if you have to attain prema, you cannot hate even a single person. Okay? The Lord said that, but for these three items, namely eternal relation with God, exchange of dealings with Him, and the attainment of love for Him, all that is instructed in the Vedas is superfluous and concocted. So the Lord said these three things in the Vedas are the most important thing. All the remaining things are superfluous. Okay, what are those important principal things in the Vedas? Namely, eternal relation with God. So we are having an eternal relationship with the Lord. Second one is exchange of dealings with Him. So next one is we are exchanging dealings with the Lord. Okay, and the attainment of love for Him. And finally, we are attaining prema for the Lord. So that is the prayojana. So we have eternal relationship with God, that is the sambandha aspect, exchange of dealings with Him. So we are doing bhakti, that is okay. The abhideya, the process of bhakti we are doing, and that is we are serving the Lord with lot of love and affection. That is bhakti. That is the abhideya, the process of bhakti, and the attainment of love for Him. That is the prayojana, the goal. So we are attaining prema for the Lord. All that is instructed in the Vedas is superfluous and concocted. So all the remaining things we are not concerned about. We are only concerned about the Sambandha, Abhideya, and the Prayojana aspect of the Vedas. And that is concerned with the Supreme Lord. And that is the Bhakti, okay, related to Bhakti Yoga. The Lord further added that the Mayavada philosophy taught by Sripada Shankaracharya is an imaginary explanation of the Vedas, but it had to be taught by him, Shankaracharya, because he was ordered to teach it by the personality of Godhead. In the Padma Purana, it is stated that the personality of Godhead ordered his Lordship Shiva to deviate the human race from him, the personality of Godhead. The personality of God it was to be covered so that people would be encouraged to generate more and more population. His Lordship Shiva said to Devi, in the Kali Yuga, I shall preach the Mayavada philosophy, which is nothing but clouded Buddhism in the garb of a Brahmana. So now, why did Shankaracharya, who's none other than an expansion of Shiva himself, okay, he is also an expansion of the Lord. So, why did he falsely propagate this Mayavada philosophy? Why? Because the Supreme Lord Krishna himself ordered him to do so. Why? Because he wanted to deviate the human race from the Lord. Because earlier than before Shankaracharya came, um, um, Buddha, he propagated Buddhism. That is, he made people to not believe in the Vedas. Why? Because people were like, becoming very, very aggressive, and they began to do a lot of animal killing and eating the animals. All this was going on. So, Buddha is also an incarnation of the Lord. So, he appeared at that time when the people were like, becoming very, very, they were not following Dharma, and they were just eating a lot of meat, killing animals, and all that. So at that period, Buddha came. So he said, because in the Vedas it is said that one can kill the animals, but for what purpose? Like, the purpose was to kill the old animals, that is, sacrifice the old animals and then get the new form for them, young form for them. Okay. So that was prescribed in the Vedas, but people misunderstood that, and they were killing animals, like, without any cause or any reason. So this was becoming rampant, and so Buddha manifested, and then he said, like, and he made people go far away from the Vedas. He said he made people, like, not believe in the Vedas. So that is why Buddha did that. So then after that, again, Shankaracharya came and he wanted to get the people back to the Vedas, but in a covered way. So that is why, like, he wanted the people like of Kali Yuga. He said to Devi, in Kali Yuga, I shall preach the Mayavada philosophy, which is nothing but clouded Buddhism in the garb of a Brahmana. So he's getting a step higher than Buddha. That is, he's making the people believe in the Vedas, but it is clouded. Okay. After hearing all these speeches of Lord Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, the Bhattacharya was struck with wonder and awe and regarded him in dead silence. Okay. The Lord then encouraged him with assurance that there was no cause to wonder. I say that devotional service onto the personality of Godhead is the highest goal of human life. He then quoted a shloka from the Bhagavatam 1.7.10 and assured him that even the liberated souls who are absorbed in the spirit and spiritual realization also take to the devotional service of the Lord Hari, because the personality of Godhead has such transcendental qualities that he attracts the heart of the liberated soul too. So now, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he told Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya that devotional service onto the personality of God, it is supreme, okay, is the highest goal. And then to substantiate his point, he quoted from the Srimad Bhagavatam 1.7.10, okay, and he said, and he assured him that even the liberated souls who are absorbed in the spirit and spiritual realization, okay, because they are liberated, also take to the devotional service of the Lord Hari, because the personality of Godhead has such transcendental qualities that he attracts the heart of the liberated soul too. Okay. Then the Bhattacharya desired to listen to the explanation of the Atma Rama shloka from the Bhagavatam 1.7.10. The Lord, first of all, asked Bhattacharya to explain it, and after that, he would explain it. The Bhattacharya then explained the shloka in a scholarly way with special reference to logic. He explained the shloka in 9 different ways, chiefly based on logic, because he was the most renowned scholar of logic of the time. So now, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is referring to this Atmarama verse from the Bhagavatam Shloka 1.7.10, and he says, now, Bhattacharya, you are a great Pandita of this court of Prataparudra. So I would like to first hear from you the uh, explanation of the shloka. So then Bhattacharya, he obeys the order of the Lord and he explains this shloka in a very scholarly way with special reference to logic. Okay. So he explained the shloka in 9 different ways, chiefly based on logic, mainly based on Nyaya, because he was most renowned scholar of logic of that time. So then the Lord listened to him. The Lord, after hearing the Bhattacharya, thanked him for the scholarly presentation of the shloka. And then, at the request of the Bhattacharya, the Lord explained the shloka in 64 different ways without touching the 9 explanations given by the Bhattacharya. So now the Lord uh, patiently listens to Bhattacharya, and after who explain the shloka in a very scholarly way with a lot of logic. And after that, Bhattacharya very gracefully he asked the Lord to explain the shloka. Now the Lord he explains this Atmarama shloka in 64 different ways without touching the 9 explanations given by the Bhattacharya. Thus, after hearing the explanation of the Atmarama shloka from the Lord, the Bhattacharya was convinced that such a scholarly presentation is impossible for an earthly creature. Before this, Sri Gopinath Acharya had tried to convince him of the divinity of the Lord, but at the time he could not accept so. But the Bhattacharya was astounded by the Lord's exposition of the Vedanta Sutra and explanations of the Atmarama Shloka, and thus he began to think that he had committed a great offense at the lotus feet of the Lord by not recognizing him to be Krishna himself. He then surrendered unto him, repenting for his past dealings with him, and the Lord was kind enough to accept the Bhattacharya. Out of his costless mercy, the Lord manifested before him first as 4-handed Narayana and then again as 2-handed Lord Krishna with a flute in his hand. Now, after the Lord explains in 64 different ways about this Atmarama verse, Sarbhama Bhattacharya was astounded because any ordinary human being cannot do so. So, earlier itself, Sri Gopinath Acharya had told. Sarubama Bhattacharya about the divinity of the Lord. But Bhattacharya at that time he was not convinced and he did not accept him as the Lord. But now, after hearing this Atmarama verse explanations in different ways, he could really understand clearly that he is the supreme personality of Godhead. And if asked the he asked Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu for forgiveness of his offense of not realizing him as the Lord, and the Lord, who's always very merciful, he manifests himself as the four-handed Narayana in front of Sarabhama Bhattacharya, and then again as the two-handed Lord, as Krishna with a flute in his hand. The Bhattacharya at once fell down at the lotus feet of the Lord and composed many suitable shlokas in praise of the Lord by his grace. He composed 100 shlokas in praise of the Lord. The Lord then embraced him, and out of transcendental ecstasy, the Bhattacharya lost consciousness of the physical state of life. Tears, trembling, throbbing of the heart, perspiration, emotional waves, dancing, singing, crying, and all the eight symptoms of trance were manifested in the body of the Bhattacharya. Sri Gopinath Acharya became very glad and astonished by this marvelous conversion of his brother in law by the grace of the Lord. Now, as soon as he saw the two-handed form of Krishna with a flute in his hand, Bhattacharya immediately falls down at the lotus feet of the Lord and he composes 100 shlokas glorifying the Lord. And then you can all the sattvika bhavas can be seen in Bhattacharya, like tears, trembling, throbbing of the heart, perspiration, emotional waves, dancing, singing, crying, and all the eight symptoms of trance were manifested in the body of Bhattacharya. And now Sri Gopinath Acharya became very glad because and astonished by the marvelous conversion of his brother in law, Bhattacharya. Out of the 100 celebrated shlokas composed by the Bhattacharya in praise of the Lord, the following two are most important, and these two shlokas explain the mission of the Lord in gist. So now, out of these 100 shlokas, two are very important because it explains the mission of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in gist, okay, in short. What are these two? The first one is, let me surrender onto the personality of Godhead who has appeared now as Lord Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. He is the ocean of all mercy and has now come down to teach us material detachment, learning, and devotional service to Himself. 2. Since pure devotional service of the Lord has been lost in the oblivion of time, the Lord has appeared to renovate the principles, and therefore I offer my obeisances onto His lotus feet. So now, the two shlokas are explained, which are most important of all the 100 shlokas. It explains in brief, the um, reason for the appearance of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. One of the reasons is he says, let me surrender unto the personality of Godhead who has appeared as Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, who is an ocean of mercy and is come down to this material world to teach people material detachment, learning, and devotional service to himself. To means Krishna, because it's none other than Krishna himself. And second one is, since pure devotional service has been lost in the oblivion of time, the Lord has appeared to renovate the principles, and therefore I offer my obeisances onto his lotus feet. Okay, the Lord explained the word mukti to be equivalent to the word Vishnu, or the personality of Godhead. To attain mukti, or liberation from the bondage of material existence, is to attain to the service of the Lord. So he replaced this liberation word with the word um, so he says, like, mukti means the word, Lord explained the word mukti to be equivalent to the word Vishnu, okay, the personality of Godhead. So here, to attain mukti means, mukti or liberation means you are getting free from the bondage of material existence and you are getting service to Krishna. Okay, that is mukti. It's not that you're liberated and you're merging into impersonal Brahman. It's not like that. Okay. So in Bhakti, Mukti means you're attaining prema for the Lord and you are getting out of the bondage of this material world and attaining service to the Lord. The Lord explained the word mukti. Okay. The Lord then proceeded towards South India for some time and converted all he met on the way to become devotees of Lord Sri Krishna. Such devotees also converted many others to the cult of devotional service or to the Bhagavata Dharma of the Lord. And thus he reached the bank of the Godavari, where he met Srila Ramananda Raya, the governor of Madras, on behalf of Maharaja Prataprudra, the king of Orissa. His talks with Ramananda Raya are very important for higher realization of transcendental knowledge, and the conversation itself forms a small booklet. We shall, however, give here with a summary of the conversation. Okay, now Srila Prabhupada is very, very merciful that maybe people will not be reading all this aspects of the Lord's interaction with many, many devotees. So he has given all this brief in the introduction itself. So if anybody, as His Holiness Bhanuswami Maharaj always stresses that if people don't have much time to read a lot of literature, different literature, they can at least read the introduction of Srimad Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam, and they will understand the philosophy of Krishna consciousness, and they can easily do bhakti. Okay, it is so simple. So, out of his costless mercy, Srila Prabhupada has given a brief of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's interactions with, even with the Ramananda Raya, which is a very, very important thing. Okay. So he says, so after his interaction with Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya in Puri, now he moves towards South India for some time. And on the way, he converted many, on the way, he met on the way to become and converted all he met to become devotees, okay, of Lord Shri Krishna. And such devotees whom he converted also converted many other people to devotional service or the Bhagavata Dharma of the Lord. And thus he reached the bank of the Godavari. There he met Ramananda Raya, who was the governor of Madras on behalf of Maharaja Prataparudra, who was the king of Orissa. So now, now Chaitanya Mahaprabhu interacts with Ramananda Raya, and um, these talks between Ramananda Raya and Chaitanya Mahaprabhu are very important for higher realization of uh, transcendental knowledge. And their conversation itself forms a small booklet. So here we have a brief of that. Sri Ramananda Raya was a self realized soul, although outwardly he belonged to a caste lower than the Brahmana in social status. He was not in the renounced order of life, and besides that, he was a high government servant in the state. Still, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu accepted him as a liberated soul on the strength of the high order of his realization of transcendental knowledge. Similarly, the Lord accepted Srila Haridas Thakura, a veteran devotee of the Lord coming from a Mohammedan family. And there are many other great devotees of the Lord who came from different communities, sects, and castes. The Lord's only criterion was the standard of devotional service of the particular person. He was not concerned with the outward dress of a man. He was concerned only with the inner soul and its activities. Therefore, all the missionary activities of the Lord are to be understood to be on the spiritual plane. And as such, the cult of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu or the cult of the Bhagavad Dharma has nothing to do with mundane affairs, sociology, politics, economic development, or any such sphere of life. Srimad Bhagavatam is the purely transcendental urge of the soul. So now, actually, Sri Ramananda Raya is a self-realized soul, though he does not did not belong to the Brahmanas caste. He belonged to a caste lower than the Brahmana, but still, and also he was not in the renounced order. He was not a sannyasi. He was a grihastha, and besides that, he was a high government servant in the state. Still, Chaitanya, because he was materially he had a material position and designation and all that, but still, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu didn't consider all these outward um, considerations. He only considered him, he only looked upon his inner soul, that much only he saw. He never looked at his outer ashrama or varna or anything like that. Okay. So, and Similarly, Haridas Thakur was also born from a Mohammedan family. In those days, these Mohammedans and all are considered outcasts. But Lord had a very high regard for Haridas Thakur because he was a great devotee of the Lord. Similar, and there are many other devotees of the Lord who come from different communities, sects, and castes, and the Lord had very high regard for them because they were very advanced in devotional service. So we cannot judge a person by his outward dress. Okay, we should only judge a person by his bhakti. Okay, that's all. Therefore, all the missionary activities of the Lord are to be understood on the spiritual plane, and it has got nothing to do with the mundane affairs or politics or economic development or anything like that. And Srimad Bhagavatam is the purely transcendental urge of the soul. When he met Sri Ramananda Raya on the bank of the Godavari, the Varnashrama Dharma followed by the Hindus was mentioned by the Lord. Srila Ramananda Raya said that by following the principles of Varnashrama Dharma, the system of four castes and four orders of human life, everyone could realize transcendence. In the opinion of the Lord, the system of Varnashrama Dharma is superficial only, and it has very little to do with the higher realization of spiritual values. The highest perfection of life is to get detached from the material attachment and proportionately realize the transcendental loving service of the Lord. The personality of God, it recognizes a living being who is progressing in that line. Devotional service, therefore, is the culmination of the culture of all knowledge. When Sri Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, appeared for the deliverance of all fallen souls, he advised the deliverance of all living entities as follows. The Supreme Absolute Personality of Godhead, from whom all living entities have emanated, must be worshipped by all their respective engagements, because everything that we see is also the expansion of his energy. That is the way of real perfection, and it is approved by all bona fide acharyas, past and present. The system of Varnashma is more or less based on moral and ethical principles. There is very little realization of the transcendence as such, and Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu rejected it as superficial and asked Ramananda to go further into the matter. Now, during the um, discussion, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu uh, puts forward, he mentions about Varnashrama Dharma, and he asks opinion of Ramananda Raya. And Ramananda Raya says that by following the principles of Varnashrama, that is the system of four castes and four orders of human life, everyone could realize transcendence. Okay, this is what Ramananda Raya says. So, but in the opinion of the Lord, this is Varnashrama system is only superficial, and it has got nothing to do with higher spiritual values like bhakti. So the highest perfection of life is to get detached from the material attachment and proportionately realize the transcendental loving service of the Lord. So only the Lord only recognizes a jiva according to his bhakti. Okay, so therefore devotional service is the culmination of the culture of all knowledge. So we whatever knowledge we get, the essence of that knowledge is to do bhakti to Krishna, to realize Krishna. That is the Vedanta, the end of all the Vedas, okay, is to gain knowledge of Krishna as the Supreme Lord and do bhakti to him. When Sri Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, appeared for the deliverance of all fallen souls, he advised the deliverance of all living entities as follows. So when Chaitanya Mahaprabhu appeared, okay, he is none other than Sri Krishna himself. So what did he do? He advised the deliverance of all living entities as follows. What did he say? Let's see. The Supreme Absolute Personality of Godhead, from whom all living entities have emanated, must be worshipped by all their respective engagements, because everything that we see is also the expansion of his energy. So the Lord says everyone should worship the Supreme Lord. Okay, by all whatever we do, we have to associate ourselves, okay, directly or indirectly with the Lord. This is what is recommended by Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Hmm. because everything that we see is also an expansion of his energy only. That is the way of real perfection, and it is approved by all the bona fide acharyas, past and present. Even the acharyas also recommend this method only. The system of varnashrama is more or less based on moral or ethical principles, so it's got nothing to do with spiritual, it's only material. Okay, there's very little realization of the transcendence as such. And Lord Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu rejected it as superficial and asked Ramananda Raya to go further into the matter. Okay, now he's asking him to go further in the discussion after rejecting varnashrama as superficial and asking all of them to do bhakti to the Lord. Sri Ramananda Raya then suggested renunciation of fruitive actions onto the Lord. The Bhagavad Gita 9.27 advises in this connection. Whatever you do, whatever you eat, and whatever you give, as well as whatever you perform in penance, offer to me alone. This dedication on the part of the workers suggests that the personality of Godhead is a step higher than the impersonal conception of the Varnashrama system. But still, the relation of the living being and the Lord is not distinct in that way. The Lord therefore rejected this proposition and asked Ramananda Raya to go further. So now, after the Lord rejected the Varnashrama system as superficial, Sri Ramananda Raya suggested renunciation of fruitive actions onto the Lord. So now he is talking about Nishkama Karma Yoga. So Bhagavad Gita 9.27 advises in this connection. So what does it say? Whatever you do, whatever you eat, and whatever you give, as well as whatever you perform in penance, offer to me alone. So it says in this Bhagavad Gita verse, it states that whatever we are doing, just give it to Krishna, and okay, and that way we are not of, like, you offer it to me, so says Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita verse 9.27. This dedication on the part of the worker suggests that the Lord is a step higher than the impersonal conception of the Varnashrama Dharma. So this is at least a little bit better than the Varnashrama system, like where, like, we are mostly, like, fulfilling our desires, like personal desires, sakama karma. Okay, you do this action so that you get this result. But a step higher than sakama karma is nishkama karma. So he's telling this now. But still, even there, of course, you get a slight personal aspect than the impersonal conception of the Varnashrama Dharma. But still, the relation of the living entity and the Lord is not distinct in this way here. The Lord therefore rejected this proposition and asked Ramananda Raya to go further. Raya then suggested renunciation of the Varnashrama Dharma and acceptance of the devotional service. The Lord did not approve of this suggestion also for the reason that all of a sudden one should not renounce his position for that may bring in the desired, for that may not bring in the desired result. So next, Ramananda Raya says one should renounce the Varnashrama Dharma and accept Bhakti Yoga. Now, Lord says no, one cannot all of a sudden renounce all his duties like that, because that will lead to confusion and chaos, and it will not bring in the perfect desired, if like, result of doing bhakti. So now it was further suggested by Raya that attainment of spiritual realization freed from the material conception of life is the topmost achievement for a human being. The Lord rejected this suggestion also because, on the plea of such spiritual realization, much havoc has been wrought by unscrupulous persons. Therefore, all of a sudden, this is not possible. The Raya then suggested sincere association of self realized souls and hearing submissively the transcendental message of the pastimes of the personality of Godhead. This suggestion was welcomed by the Lord. This suggestion was made following in the footsteps of Brahmaji, who said that the personality of Godhead is known as Ajita, or the one who cannot be conquered or approached by anyone. But such Ajita also becomes Chita, conquered by one method, which is very simple and easy. The simple method is that one has to give up the arrogant attitude of declaring oneself to be God Himself. One must be very meek and submissive and try to live peacefully by lending the ear to the speeches of the transcendently self realized soul who speaks on the message of Bhagavata Dharma. or the religion of glorifying the Supreme Lord and his devotees. To glorify a great man is a natural instinct for living beings, but they have not learned to glorify the Lord. Perfection of life is attained simply by glorifying the Lord in association with a self realized devotee of the Lord. The self realized devotee is he who surrenders onto the Lord fully and who does not have attachment for material prosperity. Material prosperity and sense enjoyment and their advancement are all activities of ignorance in human society. Peace and friendship are impossible for a society detached from the association of God and his devotees. It's imperative, therefore, that one sincerely seek the association of pure devotees and hear from them patiently and submissively from any position of life. The position of a person in the higher or lower status of life does not hamper one in the path of self realization. The only thing one has to do is to hear from a self realized soul with a routine program. The teacher may also deliver lectures from the Vedic literatures, following in the footsteps of the bygone acharyas who realized the absolute truth. Lord Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu recommended this simple method of self realization, generally known as Bhagavata Dharma. Srimad Bhagavatam is a perfect guide for this purpose. Now, as a Bhattacharya, he says, like, then he finally says, like, spiritual realization freed from the material conception of life is the topmost achievement for a living being. Now, the Lord accepts this suggestion, okay, and no, he rejected this suggestion, and also because on the pleas that such spiritual realization plays much havoc, okay, by unscrupulous persons. Therefore, one cannot all of a sudden renounce the Varnashrama Dharma, and then Raya, he then suggests association of the self-realized souls and hearing submissively the transcendental message of the pastimes of the Lord. So that way, by association with the pure devotees of the Lord, and by hearing the whatever their knowledge from them, especially Srimad Bhagavatam and the Acharya's commentaries from them, one can uh, develop bhakti to the Lord. Okay, so this one should follow as a routine program. They should listen from a self-realized soul, okay, on a daily basis, and this way they will get their soul will get purified from these outer coverings. Okay, so this is the recommendation of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and Srimad Bhagavatam is a perfect guide for this purpose. About these topics discussed by the Lord and Sri Ramananda Raya, there were still more elevated spiritual talks between the two great personalities, and we purposely withhold those topics for the present because one has to come to the spiritual plane before further talks with Ramananda Raya can be heard. We have presented further talks of Srila Ramananda Raya with the Lord in another book called Teachings of Lord Chaitanya. So now Srila Prabhupada stops this conversation between Ramananda Raya and Chaitanya Mahaprabhu because to go further, we need to become more advanced in bhakti. Okay, for that, we need to um, learn much more, we need to understand the Bhagavatam. We have to read the nine cantos, hear the nine cantos of Bhagavatam, and read other books like hear and read other books like Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu and Upadeshamrita, and many other books. After that, once you understand the tattva, and we can go to the proceed to the 10th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. Okay, then we can get into these topics also. Okay, if you got more knowledge and association of the devotees, then you can also read this book, Teachings of Lord Chaitanya, where all these are conversations are given. Okay, so one should not rush, and to gain the confidential knowledge. Okay, so at the conclusion of this meeting, Sri Ramananda Raya was advised by the Lord to retire from service and come to Puri so that they could live together and relish a transcendental. Sometime later, Sri Ramananda Raya retired from the government service and took a pension from the king. He returned to his residence in Puri, where he was one of the most confidential devotees of the Lord. there was another gentleman at Puri of the name Shiki Mahiti, who was also confident like Ramananda Raya. The Lord used to hold confidential talks on spiritual values with three or four companions at Puri, and he passed 18 years in that way in spiritual trance. His talks were recorded by his private secretary, Sri Damodar Goswami, one of the foremost intimate devotees. So now, after finishing the discussion with Ramananda Raya, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu advised him to leave his job as a governor and come to Puri and live with him. Okay, so then after a while, Ramananda Raya he also retires from his post as the governor, and he takes a pension and he goes to Puri and resides with um, uh, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in Puri. And there was also another gentleman in Puri who was with Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, whose name was Shiki Mahiti. He was also confident of like Ramananda Raya. And Chaitanya Mahaprabhu used to have confidential talks on spiritual values with three or four companions at Puri. Okay, and this way he passed 18 years in spiritual trance. Okay, and all his life, what he led in Puri, was recorded by his private secretary Sri Damodar Goswami, Swarup Damodar. Okay, he was also one of the foremost intimate devotees of the Lord. The Lord extensively traveled all over the southern part of India. The great saint of Maharashtra, known as Saint Tukarama, was also initiated by the Lord. Saint Tukarama, after initiation by the Lord, overflooded the whole of Maharashtra province with the Sankirtana movement, and the transcendental flow is still rolling on in the western, southwestern part of the great Indian peninsula. So now the Lord traveled extensively in the southern part of India. Okay, so the great saint of Maharashtra, known as Saint Tukaram, is very famous. Like a Lord initiated Saint Tukaram also, and he further initiated. He overflooded the whole of Maharashtra province with the Sankirtana movement, and the transnational flow is still rolling on in the southwestern part of the Indian peninsula. The Lord excavated from South India two very important old literatures, namely the Brahma Samhita and Krishna Karnamrita. And these two valuable books are authorized studies for the person in the devotional line. The Lord then returned to Puri after his South Indian tour. So now, so the Lord was on his way to the South India, on his way to South India, and there in Kerala, in Tiruvalla, okay, there in the Adikesava temple, he found two important old literatures. That is the Brahma Samhita. He only found the fifth chapter. It had 100 chapters, I think. So he only found the fifth chapter of this Brahma Samhita, and he also found this Krishna Karnamrita, this scripture. And these two valuable books are authorized studies for the person in the devotional line. Then the Lord then returned to Puri after his South Indian tour. Okay, I would like to stop here. Thank you so much, Prabhuji, Damodar Prabhuji, Hare Krishna. And thank you all of you. Hare Krishna.